Let's talk about the role of practice. We'll start off with a big picture idea of how practice can help us find happiness in our lives. Now, by practice, I mean two things. First, I mean specific exercises that train certain capacities and skills, such as meditation, ritual, and so on. And here you can see a list of some practices explained in various articles on the Society website, in case you're interested. The second meaning is a way of life that embodies one's values through concrete daily actions. So you can speak both of practices that you do and your practice as a whole. In the metaphor of the flourishing tree, in which earth, sun, and seed all work together to foster growth, practice is no less important than emotion or reason in fostering flourishing for us. Of the capacities we're studying, the need for practice tends to be the most readily acknowledged. Yet, it also tends to be the most neglected. We like to think that it's our values and beliefs that really matter, not the humdrum slog of daily effort. And with our heads thus up in the clouds, we lose sight of where our feet on the ground are taking us. So let's take a look at some of the potential suffering we can and often do put ourselves through when we lose sight of this simple fact. The experience is well encapsulated in a biblical quote from Paul in the book of Romans. He says, "I do not understand what I do. For what I want to do, I do not do. But what I hate, I do." Here, you can feel Paul struggling with the fact that he knows what is morally right. But when the rubber meets the road, he finds himself doing something else entirely. And you can imagine him feeling tortured by the demons of his conscience. Now, this feeling is, of course, not unique to Christianity. The image to the left here comes from Greek myth, the myth of Orestes, pursued by spirits called Furies that embody this feeling of guilty conscience. Now, in a theistic context, such demons and spirits might be taken literally, but even in a naturalistic context, we have no trouble identifying with the basic experience. We know this sense of personal failure when you know what is more conducive to wise living, but you find yourself just failing to do it. There's a real temptation to torture yourself over this, asking, "What's wrong with me?" What we're encountering here is really just a simple fact that humans are imperfect. We're products of evolution, and evolution doesn't create perfect beings. It just creates beings one step more fit for their environment than the competition. It's just a fact of the human condition. Michael Dowd calls this our unchosen nature, which is neither good nor bad, but simply our starting point. And if we can fully accept that, we can move past that angst-ridden question, "What's wrong with me?" and we can get on to the main event, taking responsibility for our lives. Now, Paul's answer to this problem was supernatural in nature, but we don't have to follow him that far. Instead, we can do just fine by thinking about it in terms of mental resources. Psychologists talk about working memory, and you can run out of it. Just like your computer, when you have too many programs running, your mind can run out of working memory. And when your mind is taxed like this, it doesn't have resources left to fully respond to the moment. Instead, it finds shortcuts that are less costly in terms of mental resources. Now, of the two reasoning systems we've been learning about, which is less costly? System 1, the fast, cheap, intuitive system. And consequently, whatever you might intend by conscious System 2 reasoning goes out the window as soon as you're in a real-world situation and your mind is taxed by multitasking, stress, and so on. If your beliefs have changed, but your subconscious behavior patterns have not, you will have the experience of Paul, seeing yourself fall back into old habits. And that can be very frustrating, and it can make you wonder, what's wrong with me? Fortunately, this cloud has a silver lining. We can change even our most ingrained habits through practice. The System 1 behavior patterns that the mind falls back on can be grouped into two rough categories, which I'll call intuition and habit. Intuition includes genetic predispositions that strongly influence all of us just by virtue of being human. We can learn to override most of them, but they remain forever part of us. Habit, on the other hand, is not genetic in origin. It includes learned patterns that have been automatized to the point that System 1 can call on them almost as quickly and cheaply as if they were intuition. It's just a matter of training. So the insight is this. Through practice, we can intentionally reshape even our unconscious habitual responses. And this observation marks a distinguishing feature between the Spiritual Naturalist Society and many other atheist and agnostic organizations out there. In contrast to the latter, which tend to focus on what one believes, or rather does not believe, the Society recognizes that's not enough. If you really want to make a difference in your life, you also have to develop yourself through practice. And to do that, we draw on the plentiful stock of techniques developed by human culture over the millennia, many of which have been developed in religious contexts. So practice is important. Now, how much practice and what kind is a matter of debate. Different religions and schools of philosophy have advocated different things here, and Chinese philosophy illustrates this range of diversity, from the strenuous striving of Confucianism to the complete cessation of striving of Taoism. But nevertheless, both schools agree on the need for practice, and both also agree on the ultimate end of practice, wu wei, or effortless action. Eventually, you find the new ways of acting flowing out of you without effort. And this is because they've been automatized to the point of habit. Whether your practice is the studied striving of Confucianism or the cultivated letting go of the Taoist, this is what we're aiming for. Complete self-reformation in line with your ideals. We can bring this to our model of emotion as well. Practice is what is needed so that appropriate emotional responses feel natural, spontaneous, and graceful. Now, paradoxically, they may feel quite unnatural at first as cognitive reappraisals grind against the flow of habitual inappropriate appraisals. But nevertheless, it is that very practice of reappraisal that trains and eventually automatizes new habits until finally, even the initial appraisal is appropriate. And at that point, we may experience an effortless or wu wei flow of appropriate emotion. Now, at this point, some may be persuaded that emotions are worth addressing, and that practice can help. But they might be thinking, yeah, but I don't have to worry about minor everyday irritations, just the rare events that present major difficulty. But that's like thinking, I don't have to practice my driving skills until I'm about to get into an accident. Quite to the contrary. Whether you're talking about emotions, thoughts, or other behavioral habits, it's actually the most mundane, ordinary, and everyday moments that present opportunities for practice. This is the chop wood, carry water approach, familiar in Zen. By bringing intention to each moment, almost anything can be turned into a practice. Taking a shower, doing the dishes, or talking to your significant other. All of these little moments add up in a big way to major habit reformation and lay the foundations for graceful responses when situations presenting major difficulties do arise. And what's more, much in the manner that Zen practitioners may discover enlightenment in such mundane acts as chopping wood or carrying water, bringing intention to such acts can transform them into new and joyful experiences. In my experience, bringing mindfulness to daily acts makes them seem more vivid and alive. Now, there's actually research to support this. Psychologists who study flow, or the optimal experience of being in the moment or in the zone, so to speak, which is typically reported as being among the most enjoyable of experiences, find the most important factor conducing to flow is appropriate challenge level. A task too easy leads to boredom, while a task too hard leads to frustration. But a task ideally matched to one's skill level may produce a state of concentration that is not only effective, but also enjoyable. Introducing greater challenge to daily activities by attempting to do them mindfully can be quite enjoyable. And what's more, the dynamics of flow naturally conduce to improvement. As you get better at something, you have to increase the challenge level to maintain the enjoyment, which is precisely what you also need to do to keep improving. So the daily pursuit of ever-increasing mindfulness, even of the most mundane activities, can be not only enjoyable but also effective for honing this mental skill. So, in summary, Practice is a process of systematic training to reform habits in accord with beliefs. We train these habits to the point of automaticity, taking advantage of even the most mundane daily activities to practice, in which we may even find ourselves in the enjoyable state of flow. And we do all this so that eventually appropriate responses may arise in an effortless or wu-wei manner when the situation calls for them. And if we can do that, then hopefully we will not find ourselves asking that awful question, what's wrong with me? Rather, we can accept the attitude that human imperfection is a part of life, and that practice is a way that we can accept agency and change the things that we can change. It's a naturalistic response to the simple fact of human imperfection by seeking progress through learning.